Welcome all to our YouTube channel for Kid of Wines. We're very lucky today to be here at Bouchard Finlayson. Chris, our chief winemaker here, who's taking us through the journey of Bouchard Finlayson and the beautiful Pinot Noirs and Chardonnays we are having here.
Yes, thank you, Manuel. Thank you for visiting us, and we're looking forward to looking at some of our wines.
Wonderful. So let's dive straight in.
Okay, so we're starting with two Chardonnays. Oak fermented and matured Chardonnay. We make two different styles at Bouchard Finlayson. The first class is a grower vineyard, planted to about 700 meters elevation. It's about 100 kilometers inland from here, and it expresses itself in quite a rich style of Chardonnay. The grapes are handled very similarly to our domain grapes, the estate-grown Mission Vale, which is the other glass, but it's essentially site expressions. They're two different wines. So Crocodile's Lair or Kaiman's Gat, we can start with that wine. In the closest glass, they're both from the 23 vintage, and 23 was quite different between these two regions, where the Crocodile's Lair is continental in climate, and at high elevation they harvested quite a healthy crop, quite a large crop. In the Hemel-en-Aarde Valley, where we are situated, where these four vineyards are planted, it was a bit of a different situation. Cropping levels were much lower. The weather conditions during flower for the 23 growing season was variable, and hence we saw a small crop of Hemel-en-Aarde fruit. Coming back to the Crocodile's Lair, as I mentioned, quite rich in style, lots of savory notes, ginger spice, and then an overlying citrus fruit profile, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely showing the beautiful citrus notes here. Also very nice fresh acidity. Yes. Really well integrated.
The wine's got quite a good presence on the palate. It lingers quite nicely, and as Manuel mentioned, that acidity balance really quite refreshing for the width of the palate. Quite a richly styled wine.
Also, even like moments after you had it, it's still like some caramel notes. Some very smooth elements on the back palate. I think it's very beautifully done with this incredible length that is already shown here. We're not even at the Mission Vale.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. One of the great advantages of working with this vineyard, and we have been producing a wine from this vineyard for 35 years, is that we also produce an unoaked component, which is always nice to back blend before bottling to find that balance between the oak and fruit. So that's a fortunate side, and another thing about the vineyard is probably its consistency. It's got a very similar expression year in and year out. So one of the more consistent vineyards that I've been fortunate to work with.
Wonderful.
Then on the Mission Vale, so Mission Vale, as I mentioned, is estate-grown fruit, 4 different vineyards, on average over 20 years of age, so quite mature vineyards, low cropping, and mostly planted to areas on the farm which has high quartz content in the topsoil. All of Bouchard Finlayson is dominated by shale-derived Bockerveld shale-derived soils with very high clay content, which we will touch on later when we come to the red wines. But for this wine specifically, it's almost like we see beams of sunlight in the fruit. The wine's got a much more linear expression and quite a lot more savoury than the full fruit of the Crocodile's Lair.
Yeah, you can see it's still closed. In comparison, it's not this food-forward style. It's very elegant, very concentrated on the palate, and yet also very smoothly done with the oak integration. So how is the oak use on this wine?
French oak on both of the Chardonnays, only French oak, about 30% new on the Mission Vale, around 20 on Crocodile's Lair, and the wine would spend 8 months in oak.
Yeah.
We don't do bottonage, we do partial malolactic fermentation depending on the vintage to find a nice fresh balance. And there's about a 8% amphora fermented component in this wine, which also adds to focus and the linear profile of the wine. As we mentioned, the wine is stylistically quite classical, requires some time, and definitely made with a dinner table in mind.
Always surprising, you know, for us continental Europeans, how fresh and vibrant the wines here are, you know, in this cooler climate from Walker Bay and Hemel-en-Aarde specifically.
Yes, very true. And obviously our maritime climate, influenced by the Atlantic, the nearby Atlantic Ocean, and the prevailing southeasterly winds that move the cold air and tend to moderate our climate. So we would experience sufficient heat to ripen the grapes fully, but those peaks are shaved off by the cool air, and it tends to cool down nicely in the evenings. So the retention of the acidity is really is key. So the Galpin Peak is a multi-vineyard blend. We have 8 different vineyards, producing vineyards at Bouchard Finlayson at this stage, of varying clonal material and age, mostly on westerly facing slopes, and mostly planted to deposits of heavy clay-rich shale. Quite a significant rock fragment in these soils, which leads to quite a significant amount of iron. And we find that the iron content in the soil tends to give the wine its structure. The ferrocrete stone, which is quite typical of the Pinot Noir vineyards, or many of the Pinot Noir vineyards, plays a significant role in the expression of these wines. Typically the wines of Bouchard Finlayson are seen as muscular, richly textured wines with dark plum and more dark fruit than red fruit expression. The wines are all marked by a spiciness. There's a spiciness to the wine. It's almost an umami expression. It reminds me quite a lot of kelp. That maritime expression. And 2 very different vintages. The 2019, again very classic, cool growing season, very little rain during the growing season, healthy bunches, and a normal sized crop. We saw early picking days, started at the end of January, which is early for us. But the wine, it resulted in a classic expression of Pinot Noir, which requires some time. It's quite a reserved vintage, and with very classical lines, quite a linear styled wines, strong savoury notes, whereas the 22 we saw a little bit more sunshine during the growing season. It was a very wet early summer leading up to ripeness, and then a very dry and warm January, which led to the wines being quite bright and open, quite fruit forward, wine drinking very well at such a young age, and just showing a little bit of difference in aging and different vintage expressions.
It's really nice spiciness, and I totally can see the kelp in there. Yes. I think it's a very good descriptor. And the iodine as well, the sanguine characteristic.
Yeah, small elements of plum. Cherry. Cherry is something, fresh cherries is something that I typically find in our vintages from a fruit perspective.
Yeah, so it's darker fruit, but it's still bright.
Yes.
I would say it's a very bright fruit. Nice.
We employ some whole bunch in whole cluster during fermentations. Typically, it would depend on the health and condition of the vineyards, and also the ripeness levels. but we don't push that typically very far. On average, between 10 to 15% of whole cluster in fermentation. It adds a minty freshness element, I think, which aids with the balance of the wine, but mostly destemmed fermentations.
Yeah, I think you can see on the palate that there is this beautiful minty or herbal element, but without any of green phenolics or things like that. So it's really adds to the wine's complexity a lot. Yeah,
exactly. Shall we move on to 22? 2022 is our current release, and as I mentioned, quite a different expression.
Yes.
From the area, the wine is open, the wine is definitely more fruit-driven, showing a brightness again to the fruit. But still, it has this underlying power. There's still structure in the wine. If you look at the color of the wine, it still indicates.
Yes, it's
that there's
nice intensity to it. Yeah, depths, and you also have the spicy notes on here. The iodine, the sanguine character.
And I think we have to mention, just from a tannic point of view, I find the tannins to be quite fine. Well integrated, seamless expression. It's there, but it's not dominating the wine, and it gives these wines the ability to age. We've seen these wines age remarkably well over a decade or two.
Yeah, no, definitely can feel it. The tannins are there, they're coating, but they're very smooth, finely grained. Yeah, definitely. Really a lot of work going into these beautiful bottles. Yeah, so Hannibal, for me personally, it's always one of the wines that I always keep in mind, because this was one of the first I tasted where you could really say, okay, this is what New World allows.
Yes.
So you can have this combination of grape varieties that you would never find in Europe.
Definitely quite, like you say, a celebration of the New World. Something that can't really be dreamt up, but it makes for interesting wine drinking. Many people won't consider Brunello, Barolo and Burgundy in the same glass.
Yeah.
But this is what's happened here, and the intention was never to make this blend. The first vintages, the intention was to make single varietal Italian wines and French wines. But the first crops were of such small volumes that it was all blended together and bottled. And the wine turned out to be quite interesting. 24 years later, we're still producing this wine. It's created a wonderful following for itself. It's definitely unique and thought-provoking, if nothing else. The Hannibal is always driven by Sangiovese. The freshness of Sangiovese is really the framework of the wine onto which the rest of the wine is built. Nebbiolo from a structural point of view and Pinot Noir from an aromatic point of view typically play significant roles in the wine. Shiraz has a supportive role in that it brings all the varietals together. It's like a glue that really fills all the gaps in between the cultivars. Mourvèdre has quite an animalistic expression in the Hemel-en-Aarde, and it brings great complexity to the wines, even in the small amounts that it contributes. And then Barbera for brightness and fresh acidity, wonderful blending component, and it just lifts the rest of the blend.
Yeah, I think you really can tell about the sour sherryness from the Sangiovese, and then beautiful just complexity, about basically all the bank. You have some red fruit, you have some black fruit, you have some beautiful spiciness as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, great tannin structure, also very round and smooth for, varieties that obviously have a lot of tannin in them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think a lot of what we do on Pinot Noir inadvertently rolls over to the way we handle our Italian fruit as well. So we're very much hands off. We we intend the vineyards to express themselves through the ferments, and I think it is visible in this wine as well. Although, as you said, there's a bit more power in the wine. It's still the wine is still supple, and the texture is still velvety. And,
absolutely.
The beauty of the Hannibal is in its complexity. It's a wine that just keeps giving, and really a wine that you should drink over 2 days' time. When you return to the glass after a few minutes or a few hours, the wine just keeps evolving and changing. So let's look at something a bit older.
Yeah, 2006. That's very exciting.
So approaching the end of its second decade in bottle, and what we've seen, what we often see with our library stock with these vintages, is the wine evolves to a certain point and then it remains on a certain plateau for a long time to come. And it's also one of the things that excite me very much about this Hannibal is its ability to just stand still over time, if you want.
Yeah, I can definitely tell that there's still primaries in there, some florals even, and then this beautiful, leathery complexity that goes into the tertiary notes then.
The wine does evolve, does develop a fleshiness to it, there's a meaty character to it.
But yeah, I mean, definitely 2006, it's still on its prime.
Definitely. Yeah.
Beautiful, the acidity is still there, some really nice tannin structure, chocolatey, velvety.
Yes. Shouting for a ragu.
Yeah, really a treasure you brought out for us. It's incredible. I think it's just beautiful to see how these wines age so well and just keep on developing.